Hi there. Thank you for tuning into episode 27 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. I am your host, Brady, with my co-hosts, Mitch and Skyler, here on this beautiful Tuesday night. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
I'm a little sad that the Bucks didn't make the comeback.
We'll talk about it.
Uh,
Skyler, how are you?
Not too bad. I mean, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day for a neighbor. We
I like
have
Mr. Robinson better.
we have a really good show lined up for you guys. We're going to be, the main dish isn't necessarily really good. We're going to be talking about the New York Jets. But now that we have a couple of games here out of the bubble, I believe most teams have played about 3 games so far. We're going to talk about the NBA. We're going to talk about where we stand about halfway through the bubble situation. It's looking more and more like we are going to get a play-in tournament, at least in the West. I think everybody expected it, but it looks more and more like it. We're going to touch on some college football players opting out of the upcoming season. We're up to 2 projected first-round picks. We've got our what's list where we're going to break down the greatest Cinderella stories in sports. We're going to go each list 5 of them. I'm sure there's going to be some repetition. We've got our heroes. We've got our what a putz is. And then we're going to amend the schedule prediction at the end of the episode here, but we'll get to that once we get towards the end. And then we have up next, we've got Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So we got some really interesting playoff contending teams coming up here. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Follow us on all of it: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Reddit, the whole 9 yards. Email us, fourthstring as OnlyFans. Yeah, Skyler Distasteful Nudes. So email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. That's FOURTH stringsp@gmail.com. So, gentlemen, to start off the episode, there's been an interesting development with college football. We've now seen 2, count them, 2 projected first-round picks, a corner from Virginia Tech, and then Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver from Minnesota, who many people had as one of, if not the best wide receiver coming into this upcoming season in college football, have decided to opt out of their season and will instead work and train for the 2021 draft. So I'm surprised that we haven't seen more players do that. But at the same time, I'm not surprised because of how important even just one season in college is for draft stock. But this is big. 2 projected first-round picks at 2 skill positions for 2 programs that had high expectations this year lose really good players.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And we were talking about like weeks or months ago when there was talk of like moving the season to like spring and like how that could affect like the big name players like a Trevor Lawrence or like a Justin Fields saying like, screw it, I'm not going to play. I'm just going to, train for the draft. And, those big teams don't have their marquee players. So, yeah, I definitely thought there might be some players like opt out, but I'm kind of surprised there's not just a little bit more. I'm kind of surprised like a Chuba Hubbard wouldn't like opt out just because there's nothing left to prove and why risk it. So, yeah, it's a definitely interesting development, and I wonder if we're going to see more high-level players.
I'm not as surprised by Rashad Bateman as I am by Virginia Tech defensive back, because with the Big Ten, they sent out emails to colleges saying that they might not even have a season this fall. So that makes sense for me for Rashad Bateman, because he can look at it and go, well, if we don't even have a football season this fall, why should I risk injury or even like just a bad season and hurt my draft stock when I can just sit out, opt out, and get ready for the draft. So I think we'll probably be seeing a lot more Big Ten players if steam picks up for them not to have a season start to opt out. So maybe a Justin Fields, maybe some Ohio State players. Trying to think of the defensive back for them that's really good. And Chris Olave, maybe they'll sit out because they did very well last year. So, but again, I think something also is like we're just now all 5 power conferences have decided to do some kind of version of a conference only season. So it's like it's going to be taking a while because they've pushed back the start for some of their seasons even. So we're not going to be getting college football in some conferences until the end of September. So it's just kind of a wait and see, because every time they push it back, I feel like more and more players are going to opt out.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of names that I'm surprised haven't. And granted, there's a lot of players that we very easily could see. There's some trouble brewing in Eugene, Oregon, in terms of that football team right now, with some very high-level prospects for the NFL draft that we've talked about, including Panay Sewell. There's some trouble out down south in TCU as well. Now, that doesn't have to do with COVID. That has to do with a racist head coach named Gary Patterson. And I'm sure that's something we'll talk about towards the end of the episode here. But, frankly, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more guys opt out. It's a wait and see, and I think that players are going to – I think a part of it is players are going to want to wait to get back to school to see what school actually looks like before they make that decision as to whether or not they opt out. Because while some schools don't make their athletes go, actually go to school, others do, and that's a large part of it. Because even if these guys don't play football, then they're still having to worry about classes. They're still having to worry about all that other stuff. So, it is interesting if they choose to drop out and keep with their degree, or if they choose to just completely opt out the way that the wide receiver from Minnesota as well as the corner from Virginia Tech did. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll look. But the big story, one we're going to talk about, because we haven't spent a whole lot of time on the NBA so far, is that the bubble is open.
So good.
We've seen some games. The Bucks played 3, including a game today. We've seen some great games. Matchup 1, Lakers-Clippers, was great. The overtime matchup between the Trailblazers and the Grizzlies was fantastic. The matchup between the Rockets and the Mavs was fantastic. We've seen some great basketball games. What, either players, teams, what's standing out to you guys with this return to the NBA so far?
There's definitely a couple things. First, I gotta say, like, TJ Warren, I mean, he's balling out. Like, his first game, he dropped 53. I think today he dropped 35. So I'm glad to see players like him are just, like, showing what they can do. A team like the Mavs, like, showing that they can compete. I've considered them a dark horse in the West. And if smaller teams like that can show that, they can, like, thrive in this kind of environment, I think we could see a really interesting playoffs. And then I would say the top contenders haven't really looked that dominant. I mean, look at the Lakers, the Clippers, the Bucks, and all that kind of stuff. They haven't looked like – they've had some, like, good moments, but overall I don't think they've looked like, oh, shit, there's no way any team could beat them in a best of 7, So I think those are my top 3 observations so far.
Yeah, I mean, going to your last point, Mitch, I think that has to do with the fact that they're still trying. They're using these as exhibition games. Honestly, they're like, we've all clinched our playoff spots. Now it's just about seeding, and I think teams like Boston and Miami and some of those lower seeded East teams need to be taken in. 76ers need to take into consideration what seed are they actually going to get? Because how soon do you want to play the Bucks? Honestly, how soon do you want to play the Bucks? Because if you need to be getting a 2 or a 4 or a 6. A
2, 7 or 3, 6.
Yeah, so it's like, so you need to get on the other side of that bracket so you don't see them to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like that's how I would be if I was one of those teams. I would be doing that. So get to a 2, get to a 7. Like, I don't know, drop. But because I feel like that for the East and the West. I mean, Pelicans are playing like shit, honestly. They haven't been living up to the hype, in my opinion. They haven't.
Are they
been
even
playing.
trying?
I mean, against was that Houston or no, not Houston. The team that hit the Clippers. God,
Yeah.
It looked like they weren't even trying. It looked horrible. I mean, JJ Redick looked like he saw like somebody get run over. He was just sitting on the sideline. It's becoming more and more likely. I think Portland's actually going to get the play-in game against the Grizzlies because the Grizzlies are going at it hard. John Morant specifically in Portland's been Dame Lillard said he wants to win. He wants to win a title in Portland, and he's not going anywhere else. So
yeah, but again, I mean, and we talked about it when we broke down the NBA return schedule. The Grizzlies had a brutal schedule.
They do.
If we look at who they've played so far, they played Portland, lost. They played the Spurs, lost. They played the Pelicans, lost. And then they've got the Jazz, the Grizzlies, the Raptors, the Celtics, and the Bucks. Like that's brutal for a team that young. And the NBA should be ashamed of doing that. Frankly, Jesus.
Also, can we talk about how the Suns are 3-0 in the bubble? That's pretty weird.
Century, man.
That's pretty weird. They hit a buzzer beater over the Clippers today, so that was. And then also I have to go about the Heat. The Heat just look like a good team. really.
Yeah.
They look healthy. They look like they know what they're doing. I mean, Duncan Robinson single-handedly destroyed the Celtics in the fourth quarter. I hated watching it, but it was fun to watch him play. Tyler Hero, also great from behind the arc. Jimmy Butler's really leading that team, showing that he can lead a team. It's not like a 76ers or T-Wolves situation where it's just a shit show in the locker room. Like he's finally gotten a team to lead, and he's doing a pretty good job with it, with all of these young rookies. So no, I think that there's a lot of teams doing better than we thought, and teams like the Clippers and the Pelicans and or not the Clippers, Lakers, Pelicans, where they're not performing to what we thought they should be.
Yeah, the Lakers locked up the 1 seed. The Bucks had the opportunity if they beat the Nets, but Giannis, Middleton, most of the starting crew didn't play the entire second half. And the Bucks will lock that up, no problem. They're still 5 games ahead of the Raptors. But that leads me to the team that I want to talk about, and man, that is the Toronto Raptors. I've always taken the Raptors very seriously, don't get me wrong. But in their 2 games so far in the bubble, I mean, crushing the Lakers 107-92. And then beating a pretty good Heat team 107-103.
That was a fun game to watch.
They just look astonishing. I mean, Nick Nurse has built a really good team there. I was on the hype train. This Raptors team wasn't going to amount to much without Kawhi, and I'll eat my own words, man. I was wrong. This Raptors team is strong, and now with them sitting pretty at that 2 seed there, they wouldn't have to play the Bucks until the conference finals and the playoffs if they do. Because remember, it's 1-8 versus winner of 4-5, and then it's 2-7 versus winner of 3-6. So they wouldn't have to play them until that conference final, as is. And I feel like this team can give the Bucks a run for their money. The thing that really impressed me, and I'm going to go back to the second game, which was the Lakers-Clippers, LeBron played like absolute dog shit.
Oh, God, yeah.
He was terrible, and he hasn't played great since the bubbles come back. But Anthony Davis has played absolutely fantastically. He put up 42 points just the other night. Deion Waiters has played really good for that team. J.R. Smith is trash, and we all know it. Alex, the bald eagle Caruso, has actually played pretty well. The rest of that Lakers team is picking up the slack for LeBron, which worries me for the West because, man, once LeBron hits his groove, that Lakers team looks almost unstoppable. And even though LeBron got absolutely embarrassed by Kawhi, like with the exception of that very last play, LeBron was caught flat-footed against Kawhi. Mm-hmm. Kawhi was shutting him down on defense. Kawhi looked dominant with the exception of that final play there. LeBron has looked really bad so far since the bubble started. The Celtics, they played Milwaukee really tough. I don't know if this team has it fully together yet. That's the thing. But again, it's all going to come back to consistency here because these teams didn't get many scrimmage games. We're only 2 or 3 games into the bubble.
And another thing I have to add for the Celtics is that Kemba Walker is right now is on a minutes restriction. And so that doesn't help them at all because when Kemba's on the floor, the Celtics as a whole are a better team. So in the Bucks game, he played what?
In the Bucks game, he
played like 16 minutes.
He played about 18 minutes.
18 minutes. He played 18 minutes, and they lost by
19.
How bad what was the score? What did they lose by again?
7.
They lost by 7. Also, Jason Tatum played like trash in that game. The most memorable field goal he had is when the Bucks tipped it in, and he was the closest player. So and then the next game he poured on 30. I didn't see what his stat line was today against the Heat, but it's like I agree with you, Brady. I think that the further we're getting into this bubble and the further we get into the playoffs, these teams that are supposed to be really good are going to get better. Jason Tatum and LeBron and some of these other stars that haven't found their groove yet are going to start to find their groove. They're going to start getting used to playing without the fans. They're going to start getting used to playing with weird sounds on the court. They get used to the environment, and they're going to start playing a lot better. I will say another surprise is Victor Oladipo decided to opt back in, and so now he's playing for the Pacers, which makes him even a better team with T.J. Warren playing the way he is, Victor Oladipo now playing, and Brogdon on that team. That's just that's scary. Now I feel bad if I were the Sixers, honestly, because
Ben Simmons is playing like shit.
Yeah,
8 points and then it's followed out.
Yeah, the Pacers beat up on the Sixers. Well, they beat the Sixers 127-121, and then they had wins over the Wizards and the Magic. They play the Suns. Now, the Suns look a lot more dangerous. We've talked about it, but they should win that. That back half of the Pacers schedule, Lakers, Heat, Rockets, Heat, that's going to be brutal. But it kind of goes to this whole thing where right now, if the playoffs were to happen today, the Heat and the Pacers would play each other. So that contempt that they're going to have for each other is already going to be there. That they're already going to know what this team is going to be about in both cases.
Yeah, I'm looking like the more and more we're getting closer to the playoffs, the more and more I'm getting excited for some of these matchups because, we would have Celtics Sixers right now. We would have Pacers Heat, which just some good matchups. Honestly, like I as a Celtic fan, I love watching the Celtics play the Sixers. Now they beat us; they won the series 3-1 this year, which makes me a little upset. But seeing how the Sixers are playing right now, I'm not as upset. But again, like these teams that we're not expecting to do really anything in this bubble, like the Suns and the Pacers, are playing great, and I love to watch it. It's just it's great. It's great. Basketball's back, and I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then if we move on to the West here, as of right now, all teams in the bubble would be fighting for that play-in tournament. All teams are within 4 games of the 8th seed with Sacramento.
Yeah, but it's only the 9th seed that does it. It's only the
correct, but the difference between the 9 seed and the 13 seed is a game and a half right now.
Yeah, no, it's close.
Is a game and a half. It's so close, and there's teams in here that can really do damage. And I don't think right now it'd be Memphis, Portland. I don't know if we're gonna see both of those teams. The Spurs have looked pretty good. New Orleans has looked bad, but if the Suns can make a run, the Kings are still a team that's building, man. They lost to the Mavs, they lost to the Magic, they lost to the Spurs, and that really shot them down. But I'm excited for the play-in tournament. I'm excited to see how the rest of the West is going to battle out, because if you look at the difference between the 4 seed and the 7 seed, that's 3 games with 4 games left for most teams.
Yeah, can we talk about how bad the Jazz are looking right now? The Jazz look like they want to drop seeds because they've been playing like trash, honestly.
Yeah, Barely beat the Pelicans in a game that, Rudy Gobert ended up being the hero, which is just textbook irony. They got beat bad by the Thunder. They lost by 8 to the Lakers. Now their schedule is a little bit easier. They've got the Grizzlies next, and the Grizzlies are building, but that's a game they should feasibly win. And then they've got the Spurs, and then Nuggets, Mavs, which will be, I think that's going to be what's going to make or break that team, and then they end it with the Spurs. But that gives the Spurs the opportunity to move up. The Spurs would get to play the Jazz 2 times here. The Spurs right now are considered 2 games outside of the 8 seed. So win those games, and Popovich is back in the playoffs there, with a couple of breaks.
If you guys had to pick right now, who's in the play-in for the West? Just like how they're looking, the teams are looking right now.
Portland, Phoenix. Phoenix just looks really solid, but Phoenix does this though, where like they'll start the season out like really good, and then they completely fall apart. If it's right now, I'd say Portland, Phoenix. But if you look at Phoenix's schedule, they got Pacers, Heat, Thunder, Sixers, Mavs. I don't know if they're going to win more than one of those games. Trailblazers, definitely. The Trailblazers have really put it all together. Now that Nurkic is there, this team looks so much better than it did. But other than that, man, there's no team in the West I'm sold on, honestly.
For me, I think Portland's definitely a lock. I agree with you. For that last one, I guess maybe I don't know. I'll stick with Memphis. I just like their core a little bit more than everybody else who's trying to get in. I just believe in them more, especially with Ja Morant leading them. So I'll put my faith in them over anybody else who's trying to fight right now.
See, I agree with you guys with Portland, but then I'm going to put the Spurs in there because honestly, like you said, I think that they have the opportunity towards there's not a part of their schedule really where it's like streaky like everybody else's, where it's like it's really easy in the front half, but it's really bad in the back half, like the Suns. Like they have kind of just an even schedule, and they can play up to opponents. So I think that the Spurs can probably lock it. I think it's going to be between the Spurs and the Suns as of right now, because like we said, Pelicans and Kings haven't been playing the way that they need to make it that far. But no, whoever's in it, I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the back half of the Spurs here, they lost to the Sixers, which definitely hurts them. But they won their first 2 games against Grizzlies and the Kings. So they've got the Nuggets next, and then they got the Jazz, Pelicans, Rockets, Jazz. So if they can pull out those wins against the Jazz in both situations, and let's say they maybe pull off an upset against the Rockets, boy, oh boy, does that look good. Now, if we're going to look at potential matchups right now, if the playoffs were to happen today, it'd be Milwaukee versus Orlando. For 1-8, it'd be Toronto versus Brooklyn. And Brooklyn looked a lot better today. I mean, Jamal Crawford's first game there with the Nets, they looked a lot better. We'd get Boston versus Philadelphia, and we'd get Miami versus Indiana. To me, the 2 series to watch in that, the 1-8 and the 2-7 are going to be snooze fests. Maybe those teams can pull out a win. It's going to be best to – those series don't go to more than 5 in my book. The same way that the Magic did against the Raptors last year in the playoffs. But Celtics, Sixers, and Pacers, Heat, both of those series to me very feasibly could go to 7.
So good.
Very feasibly to go to 7.
Meh.
Sixers, Celtics, I don't know.
That's what I'm not sold on. I like Pacers Heat, but I don't know. I don't trust the Sixers. I think the Celtics could definitely win it.
I don't trust the Sixers, but they hate the Celtics, and that's why I feel like
if there's one team the 76ers have played really good against this season, it's been the Celtics, and that makes me upset. But I also have to go into look at who's been better the last half of the season, and it's like, okay, that first game, Kemba played like trash, and we had no idea what we were doing. To be honest, we had no idea. Gordon Hayward still hadn't really found himself again. So we weren't where we needed to be. The second and third games, again, middle of the season, where we were doing like trash. And then the last game we played where we beat them, we totally destroyed them. And since then, Jason Tatum's been averaging 30 points a game. And Jaylen Brown is showing everybody why he should have been an all-star. So, like, I agree with him, like, right now, that's not a series. But I'm still excited to see it because I think it has the potential of being a good series.
Yeah, I feel like if Embiid can get it going with really the lack of premier big men that the Celtics have, like Thies is good, don't get me wrong, but he has issues. If Embiid can get it going, the Celtics don't have anybody to stop him. Really, in a similar way that the Celtics didn't have anybody to stop Giannis in that series last year. Now, Horford did a good job game 1, but then the rest of the series he didn't. And that's where
there was other reasons why we lost those series. Pat Connaughton,
for some
reason, was a god in that series.
You're absolutely right. But Horford played trash after game 1. Played fantastic. That's
why he's on the bench,
but played absolute trash.
That's why he's on the bench with the Sixers.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But that mismatch there with front court, back court is, to me, feels like it could go to 7.
True, but then I
see it going to 6, but I feel like it could go to 7.
But then I look at the other side and I go, the Sixers don't have enough good defensive players to cover all of the offensive weapons for the Celtics.
But we've seen so far that the Celtics have been, and again, I'll go back to it, streaky at best. You know, they have not the shooting. Tatum today, he had 23 points. He went 6 of 11. Pretty good. Brown had 18 points. He went 9 of 23. He was 0 of 5 from the three-point line, though.
True.
So if we get 1 or 2 games where that young Celtics team, and they're great, but they're still really young, can't get it together, then that opens up the door for Embiid. Because in a playoff series, unless he fouls out or whatever, Embiid's probably going to put up 20 and 10. Like, easily. Especially against that Celtics team, the same way that Giannis had a double-double going into halftime in that game. So that's the core there. But
by then Kemba's playing 30 minutes.
Hopefully. That's a really big hopefully. It's going to depend on his level of – it's going to depend on not only his level of comfort, but as well as the level of comfort that the Celtics have in that.
Well, in everything that we've been upping his game, they've been upping his minutes every game, and he's been reporting no discomfort levels. like no more than normal, at least in his left knee. So
True,
it's
but no
so
discomfort level isn't playoff basketball.
well, no, true. But what I'm saying is that if Kemba's playing 30 minutes a game, and even if Smart and well, I don't care if Smart scores points. That's not what he's there for. Even if Brown and Gordon Hayward can't score, they're both still really good defensive players. So it's Brown more than Hayward. So I mean that helps too in the span of like if Embiid's going to score 20 and go 20 and 10 on us, let Embiid go 20 and 10 on us. Just make sure Ben Simmons and the power forward.
Embiid?
Whatever. Tobias
Harris don't go off on us because I feel like that's honestly how you beat the Sixers is you make Embiid win, which I don't think he can.
I don't know if you make Embiid win. I think you make Ben Simmons win. Embiid is going to keep you competitive, but that team rides or dies with Ben Simmons.
Which what I'm saying,
if Ben Simmons can't put up a triple double, I don't know how far the Sixers can go.
Which exactly what I'm saying is like is Embiid's going to go 20 and 10, no matter who we put on him. Make sure Ben Simmons doesn't score.
You're right, but the difference is that Embiid's going to get 20 and 10 no matter what. Can you stop him from getting 40 and 20? Right. That's where I think that level is. Today, Kemba Walker played 27 minutes, 15 points, 4 assists. He was 4 of 9 from the field. If that's the 30 minutes a game you're going to get from Kemba Walker, Sixers don't have a problem with that. The matchup, though, and we've hinted at it a lot, but it's tantalizing to think about, is Heat Pacers. Because that feels like one of the most fundamentally sound, best basketball series I could watch. And we're not too far off. Now, granted, nobody on those teams really played in those series, but we're not too far off from when we saw Pacers Heat in the conference finals back about a decade ago. But the Pacers look really good. I mean, Brogdon is solid, and me and Mitch, as Bucks fans, beat ourselves up for keeping Bledsoe and not having Brogdon, but we got 2 first-round picks out of it. Brogdon's good. Oladipo's good. Sabonis is good. And then you look
AJ Warren's going off.
AJ Warren's going off. And then you look at the Heat, and, man, it's Jimmy Butler, and it's some of the other players on that absolutely fantastic Heat
Tyler
team.
Hero, Duncan Robinson.
Kendrick Nunn.
Bam Adebayo. Goran Dragic.
Who was injured. He did get injured at the end of that Celtics game.
Yeah, you're right. Kendrick Nunn easily could have been up for Rookie of the Year this year. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Jamison Crowder still plays really well. We're going to see what this team looks like. And that series is I can taste it like a nice piece of steak on my mouth. It's just going to be
like
so
the most?
good to watch.
I go Heat, honestly. Their perimeter shooting is just way too good right now. It's way too good. And I feel like if they advance, they actually have a chance of beating the Bucks because the Bucks have one of the worst perimeter defenses in the league. So I'm hoping Heat.
Well, yeah, because we don't focus on it.
I'm gonna say Pacers, man. I like the Pacers in that matchup.
Either team could.
I think that we saw it last year in the playoffs with Philadelphia, where Jimmy Butler was the only reason that the Sixers were even in the playoff series is that they were against, especially against the Raptors. And while I like the team that Miami has, Miami doesn't have a lot of that same core. I think it's a best-of-7 series. I think it's going to come down to fundamentals. And when we're talking about fundamentals of basketball, man, Malcolm Brogdon and Victor Oladipo embody that. And Sabonis is good enough on the down court in order to help kind of not stop, but help to cauterize the wound that guys like Bam Adebayo are going to create for you. I think it's a toss-up. I think it honestly comes down to whoever wins Game 3. I'm assuming they're going to go 1-1 in the first 2 games. I think whoever wins Game 3 wins that series because at that point they inherently have an advantage.
Well, I mean, there's still opportunity. There's still opportunity for teams to switch because I mean, between 3 and 6, there's 4.5 games. 4.5 games between 3 and 6. So, I mean, there's an opportunity for if Milwaukee keeps winning, which they've lost the last 2 games, right?
They just need one.
They just need one. Well, to seal it. But I mean, like,
That's all they need to
but
win.
they have the games. But I'm just saying is like
Yeah,
the ability for you to reshuffle, and if
For sure.
Milwaukee wins,
they got,
and then it makes it harder for reshuffling when everybody else is fighting each other.
Milwaukee's got the Heat on Thursday,
Good
Mavericks,
game.
Raptors,
Good
and then
game.
they end the two games against the Wizards and the Grizzlies, and both of those should be wins.
God damn it! If we don't beat the Wizards, I'm not gonna watch.
The only way I see that we don't is if we do the same thing as we did with the Nets today, where we just limit guys on half minutes, and then because at that point, we should have won one of the next 3 games, and we should have locked the 1 seed no matter what. Now the other thing is that the Bucks don't necessarily need to win; they just need the Raptors to lose 1 game. The Celtics cannot catch the Bucks at this point. They just need the Raptors to lose, I believe, 1 game, whether that's to Milwaukee when they play or before that Milwaukee locks up that 1 seed.
Yeah.
And then in the West here, if the playoffs were to happen today, now this doesn't include a play-in tournament, it would be Heat, Grizzlies. We got Clippers, Mavericks, which I think would be a great series. We've got Nuggets versus Thunder, which again I think would be a great series. And then we got Rockets, Jazz, and I think we all agree the better team on that is the Rockets. For me, the matchup that stands out is Denver versus OKC. Because again, he just won Joint Coach of the Year with Mike Budenholzer. Billy Donovan's doing absolutely fantastic with the Thunder, and I think that Chris Paul would go in and just absolutely give the Nuggets run for their money. I don't know if they can beat them. That's going to come down to the play of guys like Gallinari and Schroeder. But that to me is a series that looks so good on paper.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think this is a legit litmus test for the OKC Thunder. If they can play against the Nuggets and beat them and well, I think they are a serious contender to come out of the West if they can do that.
Yeah, see, I like the Dallas Clippers, or the Dallas Clippers matchup would also be interesting. Do I think that Dallas I think Dallas can win? Maybe. I think that Luka needs to play lights out. But I do think that game could easily go to 6.
Boban Marjanovic goes back for revenge.
Right, that'd be great.
65 plus a night against the Clippers.
That'd be great.
Seth Curry shoots like his brother.
Yeah, Seth Curry shoots. Well, Seth Curry actually has a better shooting percentage than his brother does, which is great.
He's been shooting pretty well in the bubble.
Yes, okay, Seth is a better shooter, technically a better shooter than Steph.
Yeah, but Steph takes 3 times the attempts. So
exactly, which makes him.
Let's simmer. That's where like analytics is dumb.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think Dallas versus Clippers. That's going to be the one where I'm going to be sitting, because if the Clippers go 6-7 games against Dallas, that could spell some trouble for them throughout the rest of the playoffs, because then it would, because honestly it could, because who's the 3-6 matchup? It's OKC and Denver. The winner of that matchup, that they could easily take the Clippers to another 6. They could have, like, if they don't get through that first round before 5, they could have a long playoff run where they're going 6 or 7 games every series, and that can wear a team down.
I think Denver could take the Clippers to 6. I don't know about 7. I think Denver could take the Clippers to 6. I don't think the Thunder could take them to 6. But here's what I'll pose is that, so right now, if the playoff tournament were to happen today, the Lakers would either be looking to play the Grizzlies or the Trailblazers. Now, if you're the Lakers, you almost want the Grizzlies to win out the rest of their games, because if I'm any team, I don't want to play the Trailblazers right now. With a healthy Dame Lillard, with a healthy CJ McCollum, with a healthy Yusuf Nurkic, do I think the Trailblazers could beat the Lakers? Absolutely not. Absolutely not in a best of 7. But I think they could take them to 5 or 6. And I think even if they lose in 5, I think all 5 of those games are ridiculously competitive. Because the Trailblazers, if Dame can just get going fully, and if CJ McCollum can hit his shots, the Lakers have nobody to guard both of them. They can focus on one, but it leaves wide open for the other. I think Nurkic can really do a number against guys like Dwight Howard. That matchup to me, and I'm rooting for the Trailblazers because I want to see them go up against the Lakers, because I think it'd just be the most entertaining series. I think this season, in terms of first round of NBA playoffs, could be the most entertaining we've seen maybe ever, where I could see there's arguably 4 to 5 series that could go to best of 6 in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've been saying that from the beginning when it was like announced that we're going to do a bubble this late and that kind of stuff. I think it was going to be like the best playoffs ever just because of the amount of like rest that guys get from where we stopped until we picked up. I mean, that's key. I mean, we've seen players come back like Yusuf Nurkic. I mean, how big of a boost is that for a Trailblazers team? I mean, I don't think they would really have a shot for like playoffs and playing well in the playoffs if they didn't have him at center. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, in the 2 games Nurkic has been back, 24 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. He's had 7 blocks in 2 games. He's just played fantastic.
Better than Whiteside.
Oh, a lot better than Whiteside. So, like, I'm rooting for I like the Trailblazers. I really do because I love Dame Lillard, and I especially love CJ McCollum. Say that again?
Didn't you want Dame Lillard on the Bucks?
I've wanted Dame Lillard on the Bucks for a very long time.
He's not going to the Bucks.
When the Bucks were shopping for a point guard when they traded for Eric Bledsoe, a lot of people don't realize that they contacted the Trailblazers and were willing to give up upwards of 3 first-round picks and a handful of players to try to get Lillard. And the Trailblazers made the right move by not making that trade. But now imagine, and I sit up at night thinking about it, but imagine Dame Lillard on the Bucks right now. This team would have won a championship by now, honestly.
We'd be two-peating right now.
We would be. We absolutely would be. So we're going to keep our eye on the NBA. By the time we do our next episode on Thursday, we're going to have an even clearer picture. And by the time we do our episode following that next Tuesday, playoff matchups should be set up for the most part, with the exception of that possible play-in tournament. And remember, with the play-in tournament, the 9 seed has to be within 4 games of the 8, which at this point is going to happen in the West, will not happen in the East. And it is, if the 8 seed wins 1 game, it's over. The 9 seed has to beat the 8 seed twice in order to proceed into the playoffs. So that's stuff to keep in mind here. Bucks are better than the Celtics. There you go, Mitch. I love that. You guys are dumb. So let's move on to our main. Or no, we got to break down our what's list. I got so into the NBA.
Yeah,
I forgot about it. So what's list? So Mitch, you had the topic. So what's our topic?
Yeah, today for our what's list, we're going over the top 5 Cinderellas in sports. The only caveat to the list is they don't have to go all the way. So we can see some teams go on really good runs, but didn't get the ultimate prize, and that's okay. So I think Skylar starts us off.
Yeah, I do. So I just love this because I was able to relive.
Skylar, you can't say nurse for Coach of the Year when the Coach of the Year award was already given out.
No, it hasn't. Yeah,
yes.
I did.
Budenholzer and Donovan.
No, because I just looked it up and they said that voting was just starting, and that's going to be announced during the playoffs.
I don't know. All right, go over your list and I'll check it.
Okay, that's what I heard. Okay, that's what I was checking. But first, Chicago Loyola, just Sister Jean, and that run to the Final Four was amazing to watch. I absolutely loved it. I wanted them to beat Michigan so bad because Michigan had ended Nebraska's hopes of making it to the tourney, like one of our best years we've had in a long time. So I loved watching them play. I thought they did amazing. And it's a more recent one, at least in my head. For the tourney. And this is in no particular order either. This is just how I thought of them. The 2012 Ohio State team, I believe that was, with Cardell Jones. Or not 2012.
2014.
Yeah, with Cardell Jones, their third-string quarterback, coming in, winning a Big Ten championship game, and then winning the national championship. That was amazing. Honestly, because everybody wrote them off. I wrote them off. I didn't think that they were going to win it all, and they totally demolished the competition, honestly. And it just shows that when you have a really good team around you, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is because you can do great things without him. Thirdly, I have the 1966 Texas Western team. Brady's really mad that I had them on my list because he was going to bring them up. But the reason I put them on there is that they were the first tourney champs to start 5 African Americans on their team. And this is in the 60s in Texas. This isn't like Syracuse going down to Texas to play Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Like, this is a Southern team in the 60s with a coach deciding to start 5 African Americans, which was amazing. I love that movie. I love that story. And then they ended up beating Kansas and they beat Kentucky on the road to win the national championship that year when nobody thought that they would be able to do it. I have the 2004 Greek national team, their soccer team. They went into the European Championships, barely squeaked in for qualifying. And then in the group stage, they beat Portugal. They tied with Spain, and that was enough for them to go into the tournament. And then they beat France, the Czech Republic, and then Portugal again in order to win the entire thing. Which for a tiny country like Greece that isn't really known for its soccer teams, beating powerhouses like Portugal and France, tying Spain, that's insane, honestly, to hear about. And then lastly, the 2008 Fresno State baseball team. They defied all odds. They made it to the World Series, the College World Series, because they won their conference tournament barely. Then they were the four seed in the regional tournament, which is the last seed you possibly can be in your region. Won all the way, made it to the World Series. They beat 2 number 2 seeds, 2 number 1 seeds, and won 6 elimination games to then win the World Series. No team in any sport has defied greater odds to win a championship. It's Fresno State's only championship in any men's series or men's team. And just thinking about Cinderella, like, again, to beat 2 number 2s, 2 number 1s, and win 6 elimination games. That's honestly insane. So that's my list.
Yeah, so then heads up, Skylar, as voted by the coaches, Billy Donovan and Mike Bodenholzer.
Oh, okay.
One, Nick Nurse finished 1 vote shy of a 3-way tie.
Okay.
So it was close. So my list, I did choose people who either won it all or in one case won the bowl game they played in. My number 5 team goes to the 2007 Boise State Broncos. And anybody who remembers watching that Tostitos Fiesta Bowl will remember that game. Not only was it the Statue of Liberty play, but it was the 4th down play where the quarterback, and he had like a long Polish name that started with a Z, throws, pass right over the middle, and the receiver catches it, and then as he's about to get tackled, so he flips it to the wide receiver running a crossing right underneath him. He walks it into the end zone. It was a great game. It truly showed that the Power 5 could be beat in big games because that was a really, really good Oklahoma team that I believe was led by Sam Bradford that year, but don't quote me on that.
I'd say Adrian Peterson was on that team.
Quoting Brady.
Number 4 on my list goes to the 2011 St. Louis Cardinals. The thing about the Cardinals team was that on August 24th, 2011, they were 10.5 games behind the Braves for the wild card race. By the end of September, they had won 23 of 33 games, eked into the postseason. They then took down a great Philadelphia team that was coming off of a championship run not too long ago. Broke my heart. They walked into Milwaukee and beat a really good Bucks team, a team that had beat them. Sorry, Brewer team, a team that had beat them for the NL Central crown. And then in Game 6 of the World Series against the Texas Rangers, the Cardinals erased a deficit in the 9th inning to win 10-9 in 11 innings and ended up taking the World Series. It was a great series to watch. Albert Pujols was absolutely dominant in that series. Number 3 goes to the 2007 New York Giants. I don't know if you could have written a Cinderella story as good as this, and I know it sucks for Skylar to talk about. But this Giants team won a fantastic wildcard game, went into the divisional round, rattled off some great wins. Eli Manning wasn't a premier quarterback at that point, and you could argue that he never was. But this began kind of that luster of it. I mean, he single-handedly ended Brett Favre's career in Green Bay in a snowy championship game in Lambeau, and then to take on the 18-0 New England Patriots team that was a powerhouse and should have won that championship. Just that play, the helmet catch, even though Eli didn't catch that, if you look at it, he should have been sacked 3 times on that play. They did just enough to win. Their defense was dominant. Seeing guys like Michael Strahan end his career with a Super Bowl win, it was beautiful. It was truly a Cinderella story. Number 2 on my list, absolutely biased, and you call me out on it, the 2010 Green Bay Packers. Sorry, this is the only time I've watched my Green Bay team win a championship in my lifetime. You got to remember this was a team that had to win late in the season to get into the playoffs. Barely did. Had to beat Chicago at the end of the season just to get in. Barely did. They then, in the wild card round, beat a Michael Vick-led Eagles team that was really good that year. In the divisional round, they took down the number 1 seed Atlanta, and they beat them bad, too. And then to play division rival 13-3 Chicago in Chicago, to have big man BJ Raji get that interception for the touchdown. It was poetic. And then one thing people don't talk about with that Super Bowl team was that the Steelers that year were the number one defense in the NFL. They were absolutely dominant. Offensively, they were really good. Ben Roethlisberger looked like he was about to win his third ring. And Green Bay dominated. They never trailed once in that game. And then the number one team on my list, the 1980 Miracle on Ice team. I don't know how you can talk about Cinderella without talking about
how did I not put them on my list?
Miracle on Ice team. They beat the Soviet Union 4-3 in the semifinal round. The Soviet Union had won the last 4 gold medals. Remember, they only play every 4 years. So for 16 years, the Soviet Union had dominated. Al Michaels' call on that goal when the game is ending, will always just ring in the ears of true sports fans.
Believe in miracles?
Exactly. And then to go on and beat Finland for the gold medal was great. It's a patriotic moment in American history. And how many kids from Wisconsin were on that team, including, I think, the current Wisconsin Badgers women's hockey team coach on that team. Absolutely great. And to me, Cinderella stories, number one to me always is 1980 Miracle on Ice.
Some of the names on that team, too, are just great. Just to, like, go back and
Polish.
Very Polish, very Italian. Just, like, going back and looking at some of those, it's like, oh, God. I also love watching Miracle. It's a great
movie.
Love that movie.
All right, so for my list, I have a few honorable mentions just because there's so many great stories like that. I got to put the 2010 Packers as an honorable mention. The 2001 Patriots, the 2001 Patriots losing Bledsoe, and then a young, no-name Tom Brady comes in and beats the greatest show on turf, Rudy, and then the
Rudy was offside. I love Notre Dame, but Rudy was offside.
And then the 2006 George Mason men's basketball team. They beat Michigan State, beat North Carolina, beat UConn, but fell to Florida in the Final Four. I got to give them props for that run. So to the list, number 5, I have the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz gets hurt. Nick Foles, a journeyman quarterback who, looked okay in Philadelphia, was shit with the Rams, and then comes in and just makes an improbable, playoff run, and then beats the Patriots and, the Philly special. Number 4, the 2019 Washington Nationals. I mean, they had a horrible first half. It looked like it was just going to be a non-playoff year. And then after the All-Star break, they just went on a tear, and, they beat the Brewers and just went on and eventually won the whole thing, and nobody believed in them. So I got to give them props. 3, the Miracle on Ice, of course. 2, the 2017 UMBC men's basketball team, the first ever 16th seed to upset a number 1 seed. And interestingly enough, they beat Virginia by 20. So it was not close. It was dominant. And then number 1, I'm kind of surprised and not surprised you guys didn't think of this one, but James J. Braddock, a.k.a. the Cinderella Man. He lost fights due to some chronic hand injuries, so he's first to work on the docks during the Great Depression, and then he made a comeback and beat Max Baer for a heavyweight title in 1935.
Boxing isn't sports.
Do you know how many times our grandfather made me watch that movie?
Oh yeah. Who's in that? Is that
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
And then the Eminem song.
Yeah, true. I think you could also argue, Mitch, that with UMCB winning that game, you could argue the very next season Virginia coming back after tough loss and winning it all the very next season. There's so many great teams that you can talk about. I'm partial to football, which is why 3 of my 5 go to football. The tourney has so many of them. I mean, UConn a couple of seasons ago, VCU for the longest time with Shaka Smart. You could talk about Gonzaga. You could talk about Indiana State. You could talk about Indiana State with Larry Bird back in the 70s. Wichita State for how long they could go. They're all great stories. They really are. So that was interesting. So Skylar, you've got the next list. What are we breaking down?
We are doing best player at each position in the NFL, and we're not going to do like the 22 best players in the NFL. We're not going to do that. We're going to do O-line, quarterback, running back, pass catcher, so wide receiver or tight end, and then D lineman, linebacker, and defensive back. So it's
And
basically
special teams.
no special teams. We're not doing any special teams.
Best
Special teams
water
are
boy.
trash.
Pat McAfee would be disappointed in you.
Pat McAfee can be disappointed in me. I feel like he should be. There's a lot of reasons, but I'm sorry. I'm not
How
going
can
to
you
be
wear a
scouted.
cutoff? How can you
Yeah,
wear a
how could
tank
you steal his look and then diss
and
him?
not respect Pat McAfee?
Because I don't want to spend my time figuring out who the best punter in the NFL is or the best kicker.
Oh,
I can't.
kicker's easy, Justin Tucker.
Yeah, like that's not even an argument.
Punter,
really.
it's probably got to be the Seattle one, Michael Dixon.
No, I have to go with the Cleveland Scottish Hammer.
Yeah, Jamie Gillian, man, the Scottish Hammer is
that is the best
solely for the nickname.
One of the best nicknames in sports right now. But no, that's my choice. No special teams. But yeah, professional football players, NFL, because I want to get into some debate.
CFL?
Over this. Not CFL, not XFL, not
Can I count the
AAF.
Arena League? Oh,
But the Rock's bringing the XFL back.
That was great. I love seeing him buy that. I'm like, yes, get it out of McMahon's hands.
He bought it for $15 million.
Yeah.
Like that's how
nothing.
in debt that league was. There was nothing. Vince
Yeah,
McMahon
and
is
you know
worth
how much
billions.
you know how much money, you know what he could do with that? You know what he could do with that? A lot. Because he's fine. He'll realize.
I told Brady that the Rock should have a mandate that like each team has to do something that slights Kevin Hart.
Like the league's worst player is called like the Kevin Hart Award.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to move on here. So let's move on to the team of the episode, or whatever.
Yeah.
The New York Jets. Now we talked about the Giants in the last episode. Yeah, I know. So the Jets last year went 7-9. Interestingly enough, won 6 of their last 8 games after starting the year out 0-4. Sam Darnold only played in 13 games because he got hurt. Sorry, he got some disease from something that caused him to miss a couple of games. Darnold last year in his sophomore season, 3,024 yards, 61.9% completion rating, 19 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Big free agent signing Le'Veon Bell, 789 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 461 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Team's leading receiver, Jameson Crowder, 78 receptions, 833 yards, 6 touchdowns. To move into their free agent losses and pickups here, actually a lot more extensive than I had originally thought with this team. They lost Kelvin Beachum, their left tackle, who had started 45 of the last 48 games with the Jets. The Jamal Adams trade, which we talked about and we'll talk about a little bit more in depth here today. They lost corner Darryl Roberts to Detroit, wide receiver Robbie Anderson to Carolina, and other right tackle Brandon Shell to Seattle. He had 37 of 48 starts at right tackle in the last 3 seasons. Their pickups, though, Connor McGovern, center from Denver, Frank Gore, running back from Buffalo, via Miami, via San Francisco, via everybody else in the league. Picked up Rashad Perriman, wide receiver from Tampa, Pierre Desir, corner from Indianapolis, George Fant, left tackle from Seattle, and Bradley McDougall, the safety from Seattle, as part of the Jamal Adams trade. What losses, pickups stand out to you guys? We'll include Jamal Adams in that trade so that we can go a little bit more in depth on it.
Yeah, obviously we got to start with Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams, the elephant in the room. To me, he's the best safety in the league right now. To lose that when you already have such a terrible defense, I think it's going to be huge, especially for a weak secondary. I don't think they can replace it. And then Robbie Anderson was easily their best wide receiver. I think he was really underrated just because he played for the New York Jets. And then a team or a guy you probably, is not a big name, but Brandon Copeland. He wasn't an all-star with them, but I think he was really much a glue guy for that defense, and I'm interested to see how they kind of do without. And then obviously losing C.J. Mosley is going to hurt with him opting out. You're losing your 2 best defensive players. I think they could easily not win a game. And then for pickups, Rashad Berryman, I think he really built up his credibility in Tampa Bay, and I'm excited to see if he can build on that in New York. And then Connor McGovern, because gosh darn it, did they need some offensive line help? I mean, it's just been a shit show since the Brickshaw Ferguson left, in my opinion, honestly. And I'm glad that
also.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad they're finally doing something about it. So those are the players that stand out to me.
Yeah, just again, like Jamal Adams aside, how many players they lost on the defensive backfield that played significant number of snaps? Like already on a bad team, you lose even more defensive backs and even like depth. Offensive line depth, they also lost quite a lot. They weren't like, again, not good players by any means, but just depth in general is something that you need on the offensive line. So that like for losses, it's just like there's only a handful of other teams I can think that had worse, that lost more on their team. For pickups, I agree. Connor McGovern is a good player on that line to get. I agree. Frank Gore gives them somebody that can do something in the backfield because it looks like Le'Veon Bell has no idea what he's doing in that Jets backfield. It could be because of his offensive line. It could be because he sat out a year. Who knows? And then I think George Font, on the other hand, like George Font also just like, and then they built up their offensive line depth. I mean, George Fant's the only one that I can think of that besides Connor McGovern that was like, oh, that's a pretty good player, or an okay player, at least better than what they had. And then Joe Flacco, he's gonna come in, save the day for the Jets. He's gonna lead them. He's gonna do a Joe Namath and win them the Super Bowl. So,
I don't think Joe Flacco makes the final cut on the team.
Remember there was debate about him being elite?
Yeah.
Well, because he was really good in the playoffs. And then he didn't get back
Super Bowl run. Yeah.
And then he didn't get back to the playoffs, and he was shit.
There was a lot of reasons the Ravens didn't get back to the playoffs for a long time, and it's not all Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco even proved with Denver that he wasn't that good. Obviously, the Jamal Adams trade really hampers the Jets this season. The thing is, though, is that Bradley McDougald isn't a bad safety. Bradley McDougald is a really good safety. He's not going to replace Jamal Adams. He's not going to put up 6.5 sacks on the season. He's not going to have 2 forced fumbles. He's not going to have a touchdown. But 70 tackles, 2 interceptions, 6 passes defensed. We're talking about an AFC East team or AFC East division that right now doesn't look like they can really throw the ball at all across all 4 teams. So I think just having a serviceable one there. The Pierre Desir pickup, I love. I've always been very high on Pierre Desir. 50 tackles, 3 interceptions, 11 passes defense last year with Indianapolis. Now he's really going to get a chance to be that corner one there. Frank Gore, I'm always going to love Frank Gore. Anytime he scores a touchdown, I'm going to bless the football gods because I think he's a great person. And I want to see him in the league long enough so he can play either with or against his son. That's just all that I hope for. Because his son is, going into his freshman year or sophomore year of college, something like that?
Yeah, he'll be eligible in like 2 years, I think, at least.
Seasons. And I think Frank Gore can do it because, interestingly enough, last season was the first time since 2010 that Frank Gore didn't rush for 1,000 yards. So just think about that for a moment. Even all those seasons he was down in Miami, he was still putting up 1,000 yards. Even those last couple of seasons in San Francisco, he's still putting up 1,000 yards.
That's why he's a Hall of Famer.
Oh, he's a great football player, and he's also a great human being. The Connor McGovern pickup, I love. The interior of that Jets offensive line was absolutely trash. I think McGovern helped stabilize that. 31 of 32 starts last year for Denver, in the last 2 seasons for Denver, didn't miss a single snap offensively last season. Brashard Perriman, I agree. George Fant, I think, is a terrible signing. George Fant is not a good tackle. There's a reason. If you play offensive line for Seattle and Seattle lets you walk, you're a bad offensive lineman. Like, you're a terrible offensive lineman because Seattle's offensive line is terrible. Just hands down. Robbie Anderson, I agree, is going to be a big hit. But Jamal Adams, if you're looking at, you go, hey, we got Bradley McDougald here under contract for a couple more seasons, and we got 2 first-round picks. So it's not like they have to spend one of those first-round picks to just replace Jamal Adams. They were given his replacement. So to me, it's take it or leave it. But I love some of these pickups they did. I feel like these pickups are solid, and they're not huge money like C.J. Mosley, who did nothing last season due to injury and just playing bad, and then is opting out this year, and Le'Veon Bell. Now, with Le'Veon Bell, I don't think Le'Veon Bell played terrible. I think he just has no offensive line to play with. The Steelers have a great offensive line. He got to run behind that. Even with a terrible offensive line with the Jets, he still put up nearly 1,500 yards. About 1,200 yards total offense, which is pretty good. It's just that offense was terrible in general. So let's move on to their draft here. The Jets had 9. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a quick sports update.
Quick sports update.
Yep. Michael Parsons is opting out.
Who does he play for?
the linebacker for Penn State.
Oh shit!
Really?
Yeah, he's opting out.
Michael
He's
Parsons.
easily considered top 15 pick.
He's the top linebacker in the draft right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big loss for James Franklin and Penn State.
Called it. Big Ten players opting out left and right. It's gonna
Frankly,
happen.
I'm not surprised. A lot of the Big Ten states haven't taken COVID seriously, if we're going to be honest.
Nebraska.
So let's move on to the draft picks here. Round 1, pick number 11, they went Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle from Louisville. Round 2, pick 59, Denzel Mims, wide receiver from Baylor. Round 3, pick 68, Ashton Davis from Cal, a safety. Round 3, pick 79, Jabari Zuniga, edge rusher from Florida. Round 4, 120, they went LaMichael Pirine, halfback from Florida. Round 4, 125, James Morgan, quarterback from Florida International. I believe he's from Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, which,
Correct.
if you guys don't know where Ashwaubenon is, it's the city right next to Green Bay. Cameron Clark, offensive tackle from Charlotte in the 4th round, 129, 158, 5th round. They went Bryce Hall, corner from Virginia. And 6th round, 191, they went Braden Munn, punter from Texas A&M. So how do you guys grade the Jets draft?
Honestly, I'm going to give it an A. I like it. I like,
Okay.
pretty much all the players. Mekhi Becton, he's a mountain of a man, and I'm glad they're finally do something about that tackle position. I think Denzel Mims was a player I wanted the Packers to get. I think he can be a really good playmaker for them. Bryce Hall, I think he was a definite steal, and he's going to upgrade that, cornerback position because Tremaine Johnson did shit. But yeah, I really like I won't go into detail, but I really like the other players. I think they can contribute right away, either like in a starting position or a backup position or special teams. So I think you could see them all on the field at some point. So I'm going to give it an A.
Hey, just give me a second, please.
Skyler he's lost his mind.
Because this isn't a good draft. I'm sorry, it's not. Like I agree. Some of the early picks were good. Some of the early picks were really good. Denzel Mims and Ashton Davis. I love both of those players. I love Cal, like Utah. I love Cal defenders. Ashton Davis is a Jamal Adams mold, which is really good. He's more physical, run support kind of safety, which fits the Jets defense. Mekhi Becton, good offensive tackle, needs some development, and he has a problem with weight gaining, which could be big. Like he has that problem, which I mean, usually you think with offensive linemen we want them to be big, but he has a problem with not being able to put on muscle and continuing to gain weight, which is bad. Zuniga is a development player. I don't trust the Jets to develop a player at all. They're the edge rusher they got from Florida. Like he's a development player. I don't trust them to develop a player. Michael Pirine, he did pretty good things with Florida, but he's not really good at it. Like he's okay at a lot of things, but not really good at one thing. James Morgan is a terrible quarterback. I'm sorry. He's fits the Brett Favre mold, which just doesn't work in the NFL anymore. And specifically in the 4th round when you need to be building up your offensive line or your defensive backfield, which took huge hits in free agency, and you don't address that in the 4th round. Instead, you get a backup for Sam Darnold. Like you need to still continually build this team around Sam Darnold. Show him, try to prove that he was worth a 1st round pick. That he was worth what he needed to be. Bryce Hall, I agree. He was a great player at Virginia. He did pretty good things. I hope he does good in the NFL. Cameron Clark, good offensive lineman. That's what they should have been doing with their 4th round instead of drafting another fucking quarterback. And then don't pick a punter. I'm sorry. Just don't. Because you have this is a team that has massive holes at massive different positions in this draft, and they didn't address it. Like, yeah, their offensive line got better. And to some extent, but again, it's like these are players that need development in cases, and I don't trust the Jets organization to develop players. That's something else aside, though. I'll give it a C+ because they have 3 or 4 players I really, really like, but I would not give it an A, especially if you draft a punter.
So, had CJ Mosley opted out before this draft, I'd give it like a C+, B-. I give it an A-. Now, here's why. Because, Skyler, you talk about the secondary got absolutely demolished, right? Well, what do they go and do? They traded for a safety who has more interceptions last year than Jamal Adams did his entire career, who we agreed was a pretty good pickup on their part. He's not Jamal Adams. We can all understand that, but he's still okay. Then what else did they do? Oh, well, they went and picked up a corner from Indianapolis who only played 66% of snaps and still had 3 interceptions and 11 passes defensed. Then they drafted not one, but 2 of my favorite secondary players I've watched. Ashton Davis was great at Cal. Bryce Hall, he only played 6 games last year. Even in 6 games, 20 tackles, 4 passes defensed. In the previous 2 full seasons at Virginia, 29 passes defensed, including 21 just his junior year. The dude was averaging nearly 2 broken passes a game. He's a stud. And if it wasn't for his injury, Bryce Hall probably would have been an early second-round pick. Easily. If he hadn't gotten hurt, Bryce Hall would have gotten drafted ahead of other secondary players, possibly like Grant Delpit, possibly like Antoine Winfield Jr. He's a great player, and they got to steal.
No,
with Lamichael Pirine, this kid had 676 rushing yards, 262 receiving yards. He only averaged 15 touches a game. 15 a game. He's not going to step in and be the number 1 guy. They know that. He's not going to step in and be the number 2 guy. That's Frank Gore's position. But if he can be more of that gadget player, the way that we see teams who do running back by committee work, it can work really well. I agree that the Jets have an issue with developing players, right? And if you want an example, just look at Ja'Kai Polite, right? The 3rd-round pick from a couple years ago, I think from actually last season, from Florida, need a little bit of development. Instead, never showed up to practice, never did anything, Jets cut him, right? But just because a player doesn't want to do anything, that's not a reflection on the organization. The organization is terribly run. I completely understand that. Mekhi Becton fell to the Jets at 11. He should have been drafted a lot higher. We talked about the Giants drafting Andrew Thomas in the previous episode. Mekhi Becton probably should have gone to the Giants. And I agree. He's got a little bit of weight from him. He's 6'7", 364 pounds. But if the Jets truly felt like that was going to be an issue, if other teams truly felt that was going to be an issue, he wouldn't have been a top 15 pick. Even other GMs and stuff have said Mekhi Becton is great. Denzel Mims is a great wide receiver. And to go to Skylar's point with James Morgan was very high on the list of a lot of teams that weren't considered immediately quarterback needy, but backup quarterback needy. Green Bay was very high on James Morgan. Chicago was very high on James Morgan. San Francisco was very high on James Morgan, even though they've already got C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins. Seattle was very high on Nick Morgan. There were a lot of teams. Sure, his stats aren't there, but stats don't mean everything in college. He had a good combine. He had a good pro day. A lot of teams were very high on James Morgan, and I'm not surprised the Jets did that because we saw what happened when Sam Darnold got hurt and they played like absolute dog crap. Now, granted, Trevor Siemian busted up his leg against Myles Garrett, but then you saw Luke Falk didn't really do anything either, and in fact outplayed Jarrett Stidham in the one game where Jarrett Stidham showed up. The reason it's not higher is honestly, to Skylar's point, Braden Mann drafting a punter, don't understand it. But what I absolutely love is we say Jets don't have any wide receivers, they draft a wide receiver. Jets need help in the secondary, they draft a safety and a corner who are great. Jets need help on the offensive line, well, they draft 2 offensive tackles. Jets need help with edge rushing, and again, I'm not sold on Zuniga, but he's a late 3rd-round pick. He's a toss-up as is. With 3rd-round picks especially, they're either make or break. There's no in-between on them. Lamichael Pirine I actually love. This kid had a great game against Virginia in the Orange Bowl last year. He's a great player. He just never got the touches that a running back want. Had he gone to Wisconsin, had he gone to even Minnesota or a team that runs the ball a lot more, Pirine probably would have put up 1,500 rushing yards last year. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. He just only got 15 carries a game. I give it an A- because at least on paper, the players they're getting really help this team out a lot.
I disagree with you. I would go more in depth of why I disagree with both of you, but I stated it. These are all developmental players. They're all developmental players.
That's
which
the
most
point.
Which is the point of a draft. I get it.
They don't come in Hall of Famers.
Well, I get that, but what I'm saying is that they usually have some kind of skill set that they're good at doing. That they have either like they might not have the size, but they have the technique down. They might not have most of the technique down, but goddamn, they're huge. Like, and I agree with you. I said I love Mekhi. Like, Mekhi Becton's a good offensive line pick. I agree, he's a top 15 pick, but he has issues with weight. That was just something that needed to be said because it's true. Denzel Mims and Ashton Davis, absolutely love those players. They're great. They did amazing things while they were at their respective colleges. I loved watching them. I agree that I think that Denzel Mims should have gone to Green Bay. Ashton Davis, I wanted the Patriots to get, but you know what? We got a safety, Kyler Fuller. It works. Bryce Hall, again, I agree. He should have been a first-round pick, but due to injury and due to a cornerback-heavy draft, he fell all the way to round 5. I agree with those picks. I don't agree with James Morgan. I don't agree with Cameron Clark. I do agree with Cameron Clark. Never mind. Braden Mann, LaMichael Pirine, and the 2 Florida picks. Like, I loved watching LaMichael Pirine play, but I can't as confidently say that if he played at Wisconsin or in other places where he got more touches per game, he would have been rushing for 1,500 yards a season. I can't confidently say that because he did put up decent numbers with 15 touches per game at Florida. That still doesn't take care of the problem that he doesn't have top-notch speed. He isn't the best pass catcher in the world. Yes, he was able to get 5 yards per carry with 15 touches per game, which is very decent. But it's like he's like being a gadget player, you need maybe he can do that. But it's a lot of maybes for this draft, and that's something I don't like.
It's like every draft, though.
I guess.
But there's some things that that a draft pick can do. Like
you're right,
we're talking.
I'd say that we know what a lot of these draft picks can do. I guess my points to you, Skyler, is that LaMichael Pirine coming out of college was compared to 2 players who we've all talked about are very high on, and that was Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones. Neither of those guys had top end speed. Neither of those guys were fantastic at rushing or receiving the ball, but they were good enough at both. If LaMichael Pirine was expected to be the number 1 back, sure, I don't give this an A- because he wasn't the number 1 back. But he's going to be limited to probably 8 to 10 touches per game in the NFL. And if he can find a sweet spot there, he can really produce. I guess my point to you, Skyler, is at what point should a team draft developmental? Like, we all agree this is a bad Jets team. So at what point do you draft to be developmental, or at what point do you draft a guy like Jamal Adams, or you draft a fantastic first-round skill position player when you know you're going to be a bad team for 2 or 3 seasons and you need to hope to develop these guys?
Development players is the wrong term to say because like the point of the NFL draft is to develop these players into good players. And we know that's something that the Jets aren't good at doing. I mean, look at Quentin Williams, honestly.
Don't you hate on big man Quentin Williams?
I don't hate on him. I hate on the organization that he is currently employed with. The problem I have with this draft is that these are players where you're looking at it and it's either they have the technique down, like technique, or they have the size or things like that we're normally able to see. Like, you can develop this player into a future starter. I don't see that with these players. I see it as maybe with some of these players. Like, I agree. The first 3 picks, all of them have starter potential, and they could start in their first year. They could, honestly. Bryce Hall, I agree, has starter potential. If it wasn't for a horrible injury, he would be a first-round pick. Cameron Clark, offensive lineman, I think that he definitely has the potential to be up there. But drafting a punter, drafting a quarterback when you already have, 2 backups, Joe Flacco, and is Trevor Siemian still there?
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, you just signed
2 shitty backups.
Yeah, and I don't think James Morgan's a good quarterback. That's my personal opinion. I don't think the type of quarterback where he's got a gunslinger mentality and he's got a big arm. If they can teach him to be more accurate, that's awesome. But again, I don't think that he did amazing things worthy of being a 4th-round pick. LaMichael Pirine, again, you know what? He could prove me wrong, but in my opinion, I think that they had other needs they needed to instead of drafting a running back. And I think that if they were going to draft a running back, then they should have done it earlier in the draft. Jabas, why? Because I think that there was better running backs at that that they could have.
But they're expendable.
But if they're going for a guy
for 4 years and then cut them and then you draft the next guy, it's that simple.
Okay, but I get but then if we're going into they need a gadget player and they're going to pick up a running back for that, there's other tight ends, wide receivers, quarterbacks even that they can pick up to be a gadget player better than the Michael Pirine.
I would have a problem if they drafted a quarterback to use gadget.
Well, that's what the Saints did, and that's working for them.
Well, they didn't draft
Okay.
Taysom Hill. I guess,
But-
Skylar, my counterpoint to that is how many teams realistically draft past the third round for a starter?
No one.
Well, exactly.
Why are you
So,
expecting it?
yeah,
No, I'm not
so-
expecting. I'm not.
That's what you just said, though.
No,
I-
you said I don't see outside of the first 3 picks anybody else being a starter.
Starter
Now,
potential is what I said. Potential, having the ability to be a starter.
but the point
What's the difference?
of the point of
Like first year, they can walk in to be a starter if they have the tools needed to be a starter later down the road.
the
Because-
point. Okay, so then so the point of 4 down is depth. It always has been depth. It's depth where you draft a guy and you hope that if an injury happens, that he can either develop enough through the years to plug and play, or to if he develops fantastically, that he can step in. Now, all of those guys, yeah, I agree. From Jabari Zuniga down, with the exception of Bryce Hall, don't have the possibility of being a day one starter. Absolutely
I
understand
agree.
that. But when you're a team who saw how bad the Jets played when Sam Darnold went down, it makes sense to me to draft a quarterback. The same way that when Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone the first time, very next draft, Green Bay drafted Brett Hundley. We see that even though you're sold on your quarterback, that drafting a backup isn't a bad thing. Take a look at what the Bills did, drafting Jake Fromm from Georgia in the, I think, 6th round, I believe.
Yeah.
Take a look at what the Colts did, drafting Jacob Eason in the 4th round. So that's not surprising to me. I would argue that, we looked at, okay, what does this team really need? Offensive line help, drafted a tackle. Wide receiver help, drafted a wide receiver. Help in the secondary, drafted a really good steal in Ashton Davis and then another one in Bryce Hall. And then everything else was depth. Did they need edge rushing? Yeah, that one I see to you. They probably could have gotten that a lot earlier. But when you're going draft at number 11, and then your next pick isn't until 48 picks later, your list of potentially starting defensive linemen and edge rushers is worrisome at best. And then you run into the situation of, if I draft them at 11 when I know how bad I need offensive line help, it's a catch-22 there. But everybody else, and Braden Mann will probably start a punter just because he ended up getting drafted. But I think everybody else is fine because they're meant to be developmental or plug and play when you need them picks. You got to fill a 53-man roster as is, and only 22 of them can start on offense or defense.
I agree. I'm not saying that. Again, I just think that I don't know. I don't like I don't agree with the picks that they made. I feel like that they, instead of Cameron Clark, you could have gone to Jacob Eason, or you could have gone a Jake Fromm instead, who's in my opinion is a better quarterback. You could have gone instead of a Michael Piron, you could have gone a different gadget player in the 4th round, or could have gone one earlier if that's what you needed. Instead of going on edge rusher, get another offensive lineman, get some more secondary help, things like that. I'm just saying is that the picks that they had, there was either a better option at that pick, or there were, or they could have addressed a different issue.
Well, I think with the
Linebacker,
draft, you
defensive
could
lineman.
always say that there's better options at
But
whatever
I
pick
again,
with
but
every single pick. Like
true.
Joe Burrow, and we even talked about it with the Tua and with the Miami and the Cincinnati episodes. Me and you were on the Joe Burrow train. Mitch isn't sold on it. Mitch and me even had late night debates where Mitch talked about the Bengals should draft Tua Tagovailoa. So it's literally with every single pick, there's always going to be someone who might be more, who might be a better player. Now, to me, had the Jets drafted, like, let's say Jake Fromm or Jacob Eason, I would be more worried, because then it shows a real lack of faith in Sam Darnold. But the Jets are sold on Sam Darnold. And I like Sam Darnold, and we can get into that here. But we have to move on. So to move on, typically at the towards this part of the show, we will break down each game individually and go wins and losses. Now that we're hitting the back half of the season, sorry, go ahead.
We didn't do a prediction for the season.
I'm getting to that right
if
now.
they're going to be rebuilding or.
Oh, you're right. So yes, before we move on here, where do we put the Jets? In or in need of a rebuild, in or in need of a reload, 8-8 playoff tier Super Bowl caliber team.
I definitely think they're in the middle of the rebuild. I think they're trying to find their, cornerstone players and trying to field a competitive team. Skylar has pointed out the last how many minutes or minutes. All the weaknesses the Jets have right now that they still need to work on, and I agree. They're closer to the starting line than the finish line, so I think it's gonna take a while before they're a competent, competitive team.
Yeah. I think the rebuild starts when Adam Gase gets fired, honestly, because until he's the head, and as long as he's the head coach of that team, this team isn't really going anywhere. We're seeing that with how Jamal Adams talked about what was happening in the locker room. I think their GM also needs to be fired because as soon as Jamal Adams spoke out against his GM, which again, as a player, should you be making those comments publicly? That's debatable, but as a good GM, you should be talking to that player about what you can do to reform the culture in the locker room and not just shipping them away. What they did, specifically when they're their best player on defense, and like a one in a generational defensive back talent. So as long as their front office is still there, it's going to be holding this team back, in my opinion. But I agree. I think they're in a rebuild. I think that they have the building blocks, honestly, necessary. They just need a builder, to build it up. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to put them in a reload until C.J. Mosley announced that he was going to be sitting. I'm not sold on C.J. Mosley as is, but losing that middle linebacker there is going to be really tough, especially because they didn't get the opportunity to address it in either the draft or in really free agency. So I'm going to put them in a rebuild as well. I agree with you, Skyler, absolutely. As long as Adam Gase is the head coach, this team doesn't stand much of a chance. But at the same time, we've all come to a simple conclusion that the AFC East is a lot more wide open than it has been in a very long time, especially now with the list of Patriots players who have opted out. Do I still think the Patriots are going to win the AFC East? Absolutely. But there's now big question marks in New England here. So I'm going to put them in a rebuild also. This Jets team has things to like. Started 0-4, won 7 of their last 12 games, including 6 of their last 8. We all laughed when they beat the Cowboys, and it was hilarious. But it was a good game that they did. This team beat the Bills, a playoff contending team, to end the season. It was their only win against a team above 500 last year. So there's points. To me, the Jets are getting there. There's a lot more solid marks on this team than there is big question marks. And I think now that they're going to have multiple first-round picks the next 2 seasons, they can address that. Are they going to have the head on their shoulders to do so as an organization? That's debatable. So as I was stating before, I forgot about this segment, but as I was stating, typically at this point, we will break down our individual record predictions for them. We'll go game by game. Now that we're hitting the back half of the season, we've covered most of these teams. We've covered the Jets 6 times alone just based off of their division. So instead, we're just going to say what we think their overall record is, and then just kind of defend it a little bit. So I'll go first here. I have the Jets next season going about 5-11, and that's going to go anywhere from about a 4-12 to a 6-10 space. I have them splitting the series against Buffalo and the Dolphins. They could clean sweep the Dolphins, but they play them in 2 of 3 weeks, and Miami gets a bye in the middle of it. I have them pulling out a win against Indianapolis and some wins later on in the season. I think that this Jets team is going to be a lot better, especially with the additions of guys like Denzel Mims, and hopefully that offensive line is going to be a lot more solid. But I still say they go 5-11. Their schedule isn't fantastic. They can't seem to beat teams above 500. I think they go 5-11, and I truly think Adam Gase gets fired after a 5-11 season.
Yeah, mine's a little more straightforward. I have them going 1-15, just like the New York Giants. Their only win is going to be a split series with the Dolphins, just because they're a big question mark right now, and I think they're definitely in the bottom of the AFC East with the Jets. So I think that's the only win. Otherwise, I'm just really not sold on this Jets team. They play a lot of great teams this year: the Chiefs, the Bills, the Patriots, obviously the Seahawks, the Browns, the 49ers. Yeah, I just really don't see them getting it's just a brutal schedule for them, for a team that's really bad right now, a bad defense that got worse with the loss of Jamal Adams and C.J. Mosley, and then an offense that really isn't that great. So that's why I can only see them going 1-15 with this team as constructed, and it's an Adam Gase team, so that's where I lose a lot of faith too. And I just wonder which AFC East team he's going to coach next after he gets fired here.
New England.
Okay, no. I've said it on many occasions. I don't think this Jets team's going to win a single game, and it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they haven't improved somewhat, because they kind of have on the offense, kind of addressed offensive line issues through free agency and the draft. Again, not to my standards, apparently, and just my standards, nobody else's. And another thing is just the horrible schedule they honestly have. Thank you, Brady. No, seriously, it's a really bad schedule. Like you said, they play the Niners. They play the I have to look at it. Niners, Colts, Seahawks, Rams, yeah. Browns, Colts, Broncos, Cardinals, all teams that, in my opinion, have done amazing jobs this offseason, have done great things, improved a lot on both sides of the ball. Like Mitch said, defensively, this team has gotten a lot worse. And part of that is because they lost C.J. Mosley. Part of it's because they lost Jamal Adams. Part of it's because they don't really have anybody on the defensive line that can get to the quarterback. So it's becoming like as much. I like a competitive AFC East. I really do. I like it when New England actually has to work for it. I don't just like us going and crushing everybody. It's fun to watch at first, but it's also not. It doesn't make for a good season in whole. But I can't look at their schedule and look at any of their teams and say they are definitely going to beat this team. I just can't. And I have to go get my laptop charger, so I'm going to be right back.
All right, so yeah, that's our shortened version of the record prediction there. We're doing it just in an effort to conserve time. It also gives us more of an opportunity to really hash into the NBA, as that's going to get more and more focal point of the episodes here now that the playoffs are starting up, as well as the MLB here once their playoffs start up in the next couple of months. So now we have to move on to our hero of the episode and our What a Putz segment. My hero, or the hero, we pick a team, a player, an organization, a moment that was just really cool. Something that we love to see, a player being dominant, an organization doing something great, a player donating a bunch of money or being a great humanitarian. My hero does go to TJ Warren of the Indiana Pacers. He put up 32 points today. He put up 53 points the other night. This dude was traded to Indiana for cash considerations. And he's balling out. And I thought that I believe it was it Keith Jackson who's doing the NBA something Jackson, the coach. He used to coach the Warriors. I can't think of his name right now.
Mark Jackson.
Mark Jackson. There you go. Put it really best. You know, when TJ Warren came into the league, he was a mid-range 2-point scorer, and he's been able to step out to that 3-point line. And he's a huge reason why the Pacers look a lot more dominant if he can keep his hot hand going. So mine goes to TJ Warren just as a big fuck you for being traded for cash considerations.
All right, my hero goes to Skylar's favorite head coach, and that is Bill Belichick. He's my hero because he was doing a Zoom call press conference, and when talked about the lack of a preseason, he said it was no different than how it was when Rutgers started in the 1870s. So I just love anytime Bill Belichick opens his mouth during a press conference. And I just love it when he shows how much love he has for the game, when he knows, this history of football when nobody else really knows about it. So got to give it props to the GOAT.
Between that and comparing his and when asked which of his players would make the best lacrosse players, knowing exactly who they would and why is great, because apparently he's also really obsessed with lacrosse, which is just a Bill Belichick thing to do. My heroes is Jimmy Butler and Jaylen Brown, because both of them were pushing with the NBA to have no name on the back of their jersey, to signify both that it can happen to really any person, that it can happen to anyone at all, specifically any black person, to be killed by police brutality, and that they're no different than another person on the street. And then also to bring awareness to all of the many African Americans, both men and women, that have died that we don't know about, because there are a ton of them that we have no idea who they are, what their names were, or what their stories And that makes me kind of sad. So because of them, they were trying to bring awareness to that, and that's not something that's talked about nearly as much. So way to go, guys.
Yeah, I do also want to give a special shout out to the WNBA for their protests. They were very powerful to watch, so that's a big shout out to them. So now we're going to move on to our What a Putts. What a Putts is the exact opposite of our hero segment. We're going to name a player, a sports announcer, a team, a moment that was just idiotic at best. Mine goes to Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van
I
Gundy.
hate that guy.
I've always loved listening to him. I think he's hilarious. But Jeff Van Gundy was talking about, and I think it was in the Bucks Rockets game. He was talking about possibly opting out of his season tickets with the Houston Texans. And Mark Jackson says, "Well, you should do it. Do you think you should go?" And he's like, "I think you should do it." And Jeff Van Gundy said, and I quote, "Why? We're a Super Bowl caliber team this year." If he was an actual fan, he would know that Houston is nowhere near a Super Bowl caliber team.
He says way too much about the NFL, and he has nothing. He knows nothing about it.
Yeah, if he watched anything from Houston last year, if he knew anything about the draft or anything about even the DeAndre Hopkins trade, he would know that they weren't. I just wanted to point that out because watching that game, it just was hilarious to me. And this is coming from someone who likes the Houston Texans, that Jeff Van Gundy thought for a moment this was a Super Bowl caliber team. So mine goes to Jeff Van Gundy just for that little comment.
Yeah, just off of that, we're going to start a GoFundMe to make Jeff Van Gundy give Brady those season tickets.
Jeff Van Gundy, new head coach of the Houston Texans.
No, I'm just kidding. Unfortunately, I have to go from that kind of a putts to two really serious ones, even though I really don't want to. But the first one is it came out that last year during a fundraiser at Fort Pierce, which has the Navy SEAL Museum. They gave a K9 demonstration, and the person who was getting attacked was wearing a Colin Kaepernick jersey. So I just feel like it's unfortunate that, people who are serving and protecting this country would dress up as an American citizen getting, savagely attacked by a dog. I just feel, a lot of shame for, who put together that fundraiser and decided that would be a great idea. And then the other one that Brady alluded to earlier in the episode is the TCU football coach, Gary Patterson. It came out that they're having a meeting, and apparently Gary Patterson did not like the use of the N-word, in the locker room, at the practice field, whatever. And he decided to use the word himself. And after he said it, pretty much every player walked out of it. I'm just kind of shocked and appalled that, a head football coach, a leader of men, who's an older, person who's known all his life that the N-word is such a taboo word. And then after everything that's happened, during this spring and summer with the Black Lives Matter movement, that he felt that it would be okay for him to use that word when, a good amount of his players are, black. So, shame on Gary Patterson and, Fort Pierce.
Yeah. No, I just don't have armpit hair. Another one, mine was the cancel culture going after Greg Popovich, honestly, because there is no NBA head coach more outspoken in his hatred to Donald Trump and what he does, and who's more supportive of his players than Greg Popovich. And he decided during the national anthem to stand instead of kneel with his players. His assistant coach did the same thing. Shame on you. Shame on you. If you knew anything about Greg Popovich, you wouldn't be saying the things that you did about him, about how he needs to be fired, about how he needs to do all these things because about how he's taking advantage of black men. He's not. If there's anybody in the NBA besides Steve Kerr that has been outspoken about what's happened in this country, it's Greg Popovich. I on either side, I have family that served. I stand for the national anthem. But if you've listened to this podcast, you know where I stand on all of this. Okay? Like DeMar DeRozan, I think it was, who said it, goes, there's many different ways for you to take your fight and to do what you need to do. Okay? Greg Popovich still supports his players kneeling. That's just not the choice he would make personally. Okay? I'm tired of the national anthem and I'm tired of kneeling becoming this idea that it's either you're for this country or you're against this country. That's not what it's about. So, you know what? Cancel culture, back off Greg Popovich. We love him. He's amazing. back off.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I had gone last because you guys took that really dark. Yeah, the really ridiculous thing about the whole Gary Patterson situation is like I don't know if you guys read the post from the kid who he yelled at, but basically like the kid posted a picture of his girlfriend on Instagram for National Girlfriend's Day. Patterson took issue with that. Then Patterson took issue because the kid who was an African American like was saying the N word in practice, and then he walks in and goes, he says something along the lines of like, I don't know what you guys are fussing about. I didn't call him, and then he drops it. He drops it with a hard R, by the way. And the team just gets up and walks out. And it's props to TCU players for doing that. It's shame on Gary Patterson and the TCU organization for allowing that to happen and keeping him as a head coach. Honestly. And then, yeah, to Skyler's point, Greg Popovich has always been one of the most outspoken head coaches in terms of racial injustice in across any professional sports league. How you choose to stand with organizations like Black Lives Matter is your choice. Ultimately, it's your choice. Just the same way that in this country you have the choice not to serve, you have the choice not to support a certain party or a certain person. It's a country built on your ability to choose. And Greg Popovich chose to stand, and yet he also chooses to stand with his players in the fight for racial injustice. I mean, in one of the games, he had his assistant coach Becky Hammond became the first woman to officially coach an NBA game ever.
Yeah. And
ever.
She's in line to be his successor when he retires, which
ever because he realized she's a good coach and the players love her and everything, and she knows what she's doing. This is a guy who's always stood up for that. So yeah, that wraps up those two segments there. We appreciate everybody for listening. On the next episode, we got Philadelphia next. We're going down. We're going to talk about the Eagles, and then we got Pittsburgh. So we're going to take care of the Pennsylvania teams. Our next what's list, we are going the best player in the NFL on, I'll call them the skill position players. We got QB, wide receiver, pass catcher, O-line, D-line, linebacker, and defensive back. So that's going to be interesting. And then we've got our hero and our putts list on the next episode. We'll have a little bit more NBA to talk about. Have maybe hopefully a little bit better of an understanding as to the situation, break down some specific NBA scores. And then we'll talk about the Eagles. So, boys, before we close it out, do you have anything else you would like to say?
Yeah, I'm just excited that we get to talk about good NFL teams now.
Yeah, right? It's been a shit show, especially when we had New England. But, Skyler, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, just to props to ESPN and TNT and other media organizations for making sure that they keep talking about racial injustice in this country and allowing the NBA to have that platform to do that. Because every game I've watched, it's been mentioned a lot of times. Yeah. Go into why the players are deciding to put the names on the back of their jersey. Go into why they're doing this, showing commercials for all of it. I have to give props to those media organizations for keeping their foot on the pedal and not letting there be a moment without us talking about this. I have to give them props.
Yeah, it's definitely been powerful stuff. So we appreciate everybody for listening. Follow us on everything: Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, SoundCloud, Reddit, YouTube, all of it. Like, subscribe. Email us, fourthstringsp@gmail.com, fourthstringsp@gmail.com. We're in August. By the end of August, we'll have a really clear picture of the NBA playoffs. We're going to be gearing up for NFL football. MLB is going to look a lot better. Sports is really picking up here. We're in the middle of it right now, and it's only going to get better. So we appreciate everybody. We're going to have so much content to talk about here as we close up our list of breaking down each individual NFL team. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Everybody have a fantastic night. And thank you for listening to the Fourth String Sports Podcast.